The galaxy watched as the human princess made her stand. On the planet Earth, Princess Alara had grown up knowing both the fascination and the prejudice that surrounded her people. She had been raised not as a warrior or a conqueror, but as someone who learned to listen, to think, and to understand. That would soon prove more important than any weapon in the galaxy. Alara's journey began quietly. She had left the lush green valleys of her home planet behind, carrying only the essentials, a notebook filled with observations, and a calm confidence that often unsettled those who expected her to fail. Her advisors had warned her. The Galactic Assembly was not a place for charm or simple kindness. The representatives of older civilizations were clever, cunning, and proud. Many had centuries, even millennia, of experience in diplomacy and interstellar law. They were not used to humans. Yet Alara was not intimidated. She had studied their languages, learned their histories, and even practiced understanding the subtle cues of their cultures. What humans lacked in size or strength, she knew, they made up for with imagination, curiosity, and empathy. And it was precisely these traits that had earned her a seat at the assembly. The ship that carried her into the heart of the galaxy was unlike any other. It was small, elegant, and quiet, designed more for observation than for defense. Alara spent most of the journey looking out into the endless stars, marveling at the worlds she had only read about in books. She imagined the colors of the skies on planets where the suns were blue or orange, where oceans shimmered with strange hues, and where life had evolved in ways humans could barely comprehend. It was breathtaking, but it was also a reminder of how alone humanity could feel in the vastness of space. When she finally arrived at the Galactic Assembly, the enormity of it took her breath away. The building was a floating structure of light and crystal, suspended in space without visible support, with chambers stretching in every direction. Delegates from hundreds of species moved gracefully through the corridors, each one striking in their difference. Some were tall and slender, with skin that shimmered like the surface of a river. Others were small and compact, with faces that seemed to shift constantly. There were beings made of what looked like pure energy, and others who carried the weight of ancient stone in their bodies. Alara noted them all carefully, taking mental notes of their mannerisms, their expressions, and the way they spoke. Her entry did not go unnoticed. A murmur swept through the main chamber as she walked in. A human princess, they said, alone and unarmed, coming to speak in matters that could affect the fate of countless worlds. Some delegates smiled politely, others looked skeptical, and a few openly laughed. Humanity had never faced a challenge like this before. Alara took her place at the front of the assembly, her posture straight but relaxed. She did not let the whispers distract her. She began her introduction in a clear voice, speaking in a language that all delegates could understand. She did not boast of human achievements in war or conquest. Instead, she spoke of humanity's history of curiosity, creativity, and cooperation. She spoke of the stars as her people had seen them for centuries, not as territories to claim, but as mysteries to explore. A few delegates exchanged surprised glances. This was not the speech they expected. Alara did not demand respect. She invited it through honesty. She asked questions, listened carefully to answers, and offered perspectives that were fresh and unfamiliar. Slowly, the assembly began to pay attention. Some of the older species, initially dismissive, leaned forward in curiosity. Others whispered among themselves, trying to understand how a human could speak with such clarity and confidence. During the discussions, Alara demonstrated something remarkable. When an elder species known for their strict logic presented a complex problem about interstellar trade networks, most delegates responded with numbers, regulations, or historical precedents. Alara, however, asked a single simple question: how do you think this would feel for the people involved? It was almost a childish question by their standards, but it stopped the assembly. They were so used to thinking in abstract strategies that no one had considered the human element. Slowly, conversations shifted. Delegates began to consider not only efficiency but also fairness, empathy, and trust. Outside the formal proceedings, Alara explored the floating corridors of the assembly. She met creatures who were more curious than cautious, who asked her about Earth, about humans, and about her life. She learned things in return: how one species valued music as a form of mathematics, how another measured time in colors rather than hours, and how yet another communicated through patterns of light instead of sound. She realized that while humans were young, they had a unique strength: the ability to adapt, to connect, and to find creative solutions that other species might never see. Despite the moments of success, the challenge ahead was clear. Alara overheard discussions about an interstellar network that was failing, a system that connected hundreds of worlds through communication channels, transport schedules, and energy distribution. If the network collapsed, entire planets could be cut off from each other, leading to confusion and scarcity. The delegates discussed it with a sense of urgency and fear. Humanity had no armies to solve this, and few expected Alara to offer anything meaningful. But she already had an idea forming in her mind, a plan that would require patience, listening, and the willingness to learn. Alara spent the night in her chamber, overlooking the vast expanse of stars. She opened her notebook and wrote down what she had observed. She noted the patterns in communication between species, the ways they responded to questions, and the assumptions they made about each other. She sketched diagrams of the network as she understood it and wrote down potential ways to approach it, not as a problem to be fixed by force, but as a living system to be understood. Sleep came reluctantly, but even in her dreams, Alara continued to think about solutions. She imagined herself walking through the network itself, following invisible lines of energy and information, listening to its rhythm, and gently nudging it back into harmony. She felt a deep sense of responsibility, not for conquest or glory, but for the trust placed in her shoulders. The galaxy had not seen a human stand like this before. The next day, when the assembly reconvened, Alara's voice carried a quiet authority. She spoke about cooperation, curiosity, and understanding. She suggested forming teams that mixed humans with delegates from other species, allowing each group to combine strengths. Some delegates nodded skeptically, others cautiously approved. What mattered was that they listened. That alone was a small victory. Even in the corridors outside, discussions had begun to change. Representatives who had laughed at her before now approached her with questions. They were curious, not hostile. They wanted to understand humanity's perspective because it was different, because it was unexpected. Alara realized that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was watching, yes, but it was also learning. Humanity had entered a space where history, strategy, and logic were valued, but so was heart, intuition, and empathy. By the end of the day, Princess Alara returned to her chamber exhausted but satisfied. She had not yet solved the network crisis, nor had she won the full respect of the assembly. But she had done something just as important. She had shown that a human could stand calmly, thoughtfully, and persuasively in a place dominated by far older civilizations. She had opened doors that others had closed, created curiosity where there had been doubt, and begun a ripple of change that might spread across the galaxy. As she looked out at the stars, Alara understood that this was her first real test. It would not be a test of strength or aggression, but of patience, understanding, and ingenuity. She had to navigate the complex minds of the galaxy without force, and that was far more difficult than any battle. But she also knew that humans had a gift that others often overlooked: the ability to connect, to imagine, and to inspire. And if she could harness that gift, the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. Somewhere in the assembly, a small group of delegates observed her quietly. They had expected a young human princess to be timid, naive, or easily intimidated. Instead, they saw someone who listened, learned, and spoke with thoughtfulness. A spark of interest ignited. Perhaps humanity, they thought, was more capable than they had believed. Perhaps there was something in humans that even the oldest civilizations had forgotten. Princess Alara smiled softly. She did not need their praise nor their approval. What she needed was opportunity, the chance to show that even a single human could make a difference in a galaxy full of doubt. She would take that chance, and she would not fail. The galaxy had indeed watched her first steps in the assembly, but it would not only watch. It would learn, and in time it might even follow. And so the human princess began her quiet but powerful journey, standing alone yet unafraid, ready to face challenges that no one had imagined, armed not with weapons, but with mind, heart, and unshakable resolve. The next morning, Princess Alara entered the grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly with the quiet confidence that had begun to earn her attention. The chamber hummed with energy as delegates from hundreds of species prepared for the day's discussions. Today, the topic that had caused murmurs and concern for weeks would finally be addressed. The Interstellar Communication Network, a system that connected star systems across the galaxy, was faltering. Without it, trade, transport, and even simple conversations between planets risked collapse. Many delegates spoke first. They presented diagrams, statistics, and predictions. Words like catastrophe and instability echoed through the chamber. Some suggested shutting down the network entirely and starting fresh, while others proposed complex rules and automated control systems to fix the issues. There was a sense of urgency, but also a familiar rigidity. Solutions were being approached in ways that had always worked for these ancient species. Alara listened carefully. She did not interrupt, though the ideas being presented made her frown slightly. Something was missing. The delegates focused on control and efficiency, but none considered the network as a living system, one that responded differently depending on the species and environments it connected. Humans had always approached problems differently. They asked questions others would not ask and looked for patterns that were not immediately obvious. When it was her turn to speak, Alara rose quietly. "I understand the concerns," she began, her voice calm but firm. "But I think we are approaching this as if the network is only a tool. What if it is more than that? What if it behaves like a living system, with needs and patterns we have not yet seen?" A few delegates raised their brows, clearly skeptical. One of the elders, a tall being with crystalline limbs, spoke. "Princess, we appreciate your perspective, but this is a technical problem. We need calculations, models, and control measures. We cannot reason with a system as if it were alive." Alara nodded. "I understand. But what humans have learned is that sometimes listening is more powerful than commanding. If we pay attention to the way the network responds, if we learn its patterns rather than forcing it, we may find solutions that no amount of calculation alone can provide." There was a pause. Some delegates whispered to each other, unsure whether to dismiss her words or consider them. Curiosity, however, was beginning to spark. No one had proposed thinking about the network in such a way before. Alara proposed forming teams. Each team would mix humans with representatives from other species, combining different approaches and strengths. Humans would focus on observing, asking questions, and suggesting ideas based on intuition and creativity. Other species would provide their knowledge of technology, structure, and historical precedents. Together, she explained, they could approach the problem from multiple angles simultaneously. A few delegates scoffed quietly, but some were intrigued. They had spent centuries solving problems with the same methods and had rarely seen ideas emerge that were truly different. Alara's suggestion was unusual, and the novelty of it drew attention. Slowly, votes were cast, and the assembly agreed to allow the experiment. Alara's team began work immediately. She paired herself with 2 humans, a mathematician and an engineer, and 3 alien delegates who had expertise in energy systems, communications, and logic modeling. The first sessions were awkward. The alien delegates were used to rigid procedures, while the humans preferred brainstorming, asking questions, and even using analogies from Earth's culture to explain abstract concepts. Alara encouraged both sides to listen carefully and respect each other's ways of thinking. Days passed. The humans asked questions the aliens had never considered. What would happen if the network felt ignored? One of them asked. What patterns exist in the interruptions? Are they random, or do they follow certain rhythms? The alien delegates began to notice that the humans' questions, while unusual, revealed patterns they had overlooked. Alara observed quietly, guiding conversations with gentle prompts. She noticed that the network seemed to respond more smoothly when teams communicated openly rather than through rigid command structures. It was almost as if it preferred cooperation over control. When humans and aliens worked together, it reacted in ways that no calculations could have predicted. Word of the experiment spread quickly through the assembly. Delegates who had been skeptical began to follow updates with growing interest. They watched as the network's performance improved in small but noticeable ways. Messages flowed more efficiently, and the timing of transport schedules began to stabilize. The problem had not been fully solved, but the direction was promising. Outside the formal sessions, Alara continued her quiet work. She visited other teams, sharing observations and encouraging collaboration. She noticed that when she asked questions without judgment, even the most reserved delegates began to open up. They explained their methods, shared ideas, and slowly, some began to adopt the human approach of creative thinking and empathy. Alara realized that this was not only about fixing a system, it was about teaching the galaxy a new way of thinking. In her private moments, she recorded her thoughts in her notebook. She wrote about patterns in communication, unexpected behaviors of the network, and the reactions of different species. She sketched diagrams of connections and flow, marking areas that were improving and areas that needed attention. She reflected on how humans often solved problems not through force, but through observation, understanding, and connection. This was her greatest strength, and now it was beginning to make a difference. Alara also faced challenges. Not all delegates were cooperative. Some complained that the humans were inexperienced, that their methods were slow, or that intuition alone could not solve complex interstellar problems. These moments required patience. Alara listened to their concerns, acknowledged them, and gently guided the discussion back to collaboration. She had learned that respect was earned not by arguing, but by showing results. One evening, while observing the network's patterns, Alara noticed something remarkable. Certain interruptions in the system were not random. They appeared only when communication lines passed through specific star systems that had extreme environmental conditions. No previous analysis had accounted for these subtle effects. Alara shared her observation with the team. It was a breakthrough. The network's failures were not caused by neglect or technical errors alone. They were responses to real conditions in the galaxy. The alien delegates were impressed. One of them, a being with silver feathers and wide, reflective eyes, admitted, "We never noticed this before. Humans have a way of seeing things others overlook." Alara smiled quietly. This was not praise she sought, but confirmation that her approach was working. By observing, listening, and asking questions, humans could reveal truths that even ancient civilizations had missed. As the days turned into weeks, the network continued to improve. Alara's approach inspired other teams to adopt similar methods. Creativity, collaboration, and empathy began to spread through the assembly. Delegates who had once doubted humanity now watched with quiet respect. They saw that humans could contribute not only through strength or technology, but through thought, observation, and understanding. Alara herself continued to grow. She learned the subtle behaviors of alien species, the rhythms of the network, and the hidden patterns of interstellar systems. She realized that leadership was not about being the loudest or the most forceful voice in the room. It was about listening, understanding, and guiding others toward a shared goal. Humanity had always survived by adapting to challenges, and now those same principles were helping her navigate the complexities of the galaxy. One morning, the assembly gathered to hear updates. Alara stepped forward, her calm presence commanding attention. She presented the team's findings, explaining the patterns, the subtle environmental influences, and the ways collaboration had improved the network. Her explanations were clear and simple, but powerful. She showed that the network was not failing. It was learning, responding, and adapting to the way species interacted with it. The delegates were amazed. Some admitted, quietly, that they had not considered the network as a living, responsive system. Others nodded, realizing that collaboration and empathy could produce results far beyond strict rules and rigid calculations. Alara's human perspective had revealed possibilities that had been invisible to even the oldest civilizations. After the session, a small group of delegates approached her. They asked questions, sought advice, and even suggested new experiments based on her ideas. Alara welcomed each inquiry, responding with patience and curiosity. She understood that this was more than solving a technical problem. It was teaching the galaxy to see differently, to value observation, creativity, and human intuition. As the day ended, Alara returned to her chamber, tired but satisfied. The interstellar communication network was far from perfect, but it was no longer failing. More importantly, the galaxy had begun to recognize humanity's potential. Humans were not the strongest, the oldest, or the most experienced species, but they had a gift that could inspire change, the ability to think differently, to observe deeply, and to connect with others. That night, as she looked out at the stars, Alara felt a quiet sense of hope. She knew that challenges would continue, and that not all species would accept humanity's perspective immediately. But she also knew that change was possible, and that her people could contribute to the galaxy in ways no one had imagined. She had taken the first steps, and now the galaxy was beginning to follow. In the quiet hours, Alara wrote in her notebook once more. She reflected on the progress of the network, the lessons she had learned from her team, and the ways humanity's strengths were being recognized. She understood that her journey was just beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown challenges, but also full of opportunities for humans to shine. And when the time came, she would be ready to lead, not with force, but with the very qualities that made her people unique. The galaxy watched, as it had from the beginning, but now it was watching with curiosity, with hope, and with a new understanding. Humanity was not just a small, young species in the cosmos. It was a species capable of remarkable insight, connection, and problem-solving. And Princess Alara, with her quiet confidence and patient guidance, had begun to show the galaxy what that truly meant. The galaxy had begun to notice the human princess in ways no one expected. Word of her work on the interstellar communication network spread quickly, reaching corners of the assembly where humans had rarely been considered important. Delegates whispered about her creativity, her patience, and the way she inspired collaboration between species that had never trusted each other. Humanity, still young in the stars, was gaining a reputation, not for weapons or strength, but for thought, empathy, and ingenuity. Yet the challenge was far from over. While the network had stabilized, a new complication had emerged. The system was responding better to observation and collaboration, but there were inconsistencies that no one could yet explain. Certain star systems experienced delays, others transmitted information incorrectly, and some appeared almost disconnected. The patterns were subtle and complex, and no algorithm, no matter how sophisticated, could fully anticipate them. It was a puzzle that required more than calculations. It required understanding, intuition, and adaptability. Alara knew this was her moment to show the true potential of humanity. She gathered her team, which now included several alien delegates who had grown to trust her methods. "The network is alive," she said simply, "and it is trying to tell us something. We have to listen carefully, understand its needs, and respond thoughtfully. Force and rules will not fix this. Only attention, creativity, and cooperation can." Some delegates remained skeptical. A few grumbled that humans were relying too much on intuition, that they had no proper methods for problem-solving. Alara smiled. Skepticism was natural and sometimes even necessary, but she knew that observation and patience often revealed solutions that experience alone could not. She began her work by studying the data flowing through the network. She noticed a pattern in the inconsistencies. Delays were linked to planets that had recently adapted new forms of energy or communication systems. The network, it seemed, was adjusting itself, learning how to integrate new information. Most delegates had ignored this subtle signal, focusing instead on fixing the symptoms rather than understanding the cause. Alara proposed a new approach. Teams would observe the network without attempting to control it, taking note of its responses to different conditions and inputs. Humans and aliens worked side by side, recording every detail, discussing hypotheses, and testing ideas in small, careful experiments. Alara guided the sessions with quiet authority, asking questions that prompted deeper thinking. What is the network telling us here? How does it respond when species cooperate? What patterns emerge when we step back and listen? The results were remarkable. Slowly, the network began to respond more consistently. Delays were reduced, errors disappeared, and the previously disconnected systems started functioning smoothly. The alien delegates, once doubtful, were astonished. "I did not know observation alone could achieve this," said one, a being with flowing, liquid-like skin. "Your approach is extraordinary." Alara merely nodded. She did not need praise. What mattered was that the network was stabilizing, and that humanity's unique methods were proving effective. As the work continued, Alara noticed something even more remarkable. The network seemed to react positively not only to careful observation, but also to understanding between species. When humans and aliens discussed solutions collaboratively, the network's responses improved. When disputes arose, the system hesitated, slowed, or created errors. It was as if the network mirrored the behavior of those who guided it. Alara realized that the challenge was not just technical, it was social and cultural. The galaxy itself, in miniature, reflected human principles. Cooperation, patience, and empathy could solve problems more effectively than control or dominance. The progress drew attention from other parts of the galaxy. Delegates from species who had not yet participated in the experiments requested to observe, to contribute, and even to learn from humans. Alara welcomed them all, explaining the principles of collaboration, observation, and understanding. She encouraged creativity, asking teams to consider solutions that might seem unconventional. "Do not dismiss ideas because they are unusual," she said. "Innovation often comes from seeing connections that others overlook." Slowly, the atmosphere of the assembly began to shift. Where tension and skepticism had once dominated, curiosity and cooperation now prevailed. Delegates who had been rivals discovered common ground. Humans who had once been underestimated became respected participants, and the network itself responded with increasing stability. Alara watched this transformation quietly, understanding that the real success was not merely technical, but cultural. She was teaching the galaxy a new way to approach problems, one that valued intelligence, creativity, and empathy over hierarchy, tradition, or force. But the challenge was not entirely over. Despite the improvements, the network remained unpredictable in certain regions, particularly near systems undergoing rapid expansion or environmental change. These areas created fluctuations that no single team could manage alone. Alara realized that the next step required a broader perspective. The galaxy itself needed to be understood as an interconnected whole, with each system influencing the others. She proposed a new initiative, a series of observation missions, pairing humans with aliens to travel to the most unstable systems and study their interactions firsthand. These missions were not dangerous in a physical sense, but they required patience, keen observation, and adaptability. Delegates were hesitant at first, unsure if humans could contribute meaningfully in this context. But Alara's track record spoke for itself, and eventually a small group of volunteers joined her. On the first mission, Alara led her team to a system where the network had been erratic for months. They observed planetary communications, energy flows, and interspecies coordination, documenting every subtle shift. Alara encouraged discussion and reflection at every step, asking the team to consider not just what was happening, but why it was happening. Slowly, patterns emerged. They realized that cultural practices, environmental changes, and even daily routines on planets affected the network. Understanding these nuances allowed the team to propose adjustments that improved performance, not by imposing control, but by aligning with natural behaviors. The alien delegates on the mission were amazed. They had always approached problems with strict rules, commands, and calculations. But here, observation, empathy, and creative thinking revealed solutions that no amount of rigid logic could. One delegate, a species with crystalline wings and shimmering scales, admitted quietly, "We have much to learn from humans." Alara smiled. Learning, she thought, was the true strength of her people. Back at the assembly, updates from the mission sparked widespread interest. Delegates who had been doubtful were now eager to contribute. Discussions shifted from debate to collaboration, with humans often guiding the conversation without commanding it. Alara's presence alone inspired patience, curiosity, and creativity. Her approach demonstrated that intelligence was not just a matter of knowledge or experience, but also of listening, understanding, and connecting with others. As weeks turned into months, the network reached a level of stability unseen before. Systems that had once been unreliable now communicated efficiently, transport routes functioned predictably, and interstellar commerce and diplomacy thrived. Alara's influence was evident not only in technical outcomes, but in the attitudes of delegates. The assembly had transformed from a place of skepticism and competition into a space of cooperation and shared learning. Despite the progress, Alara remained humble. She understood that the galaxy was vast and full of unknowns. Challenges would continue, and not every problem could be solved at once. Yet she also understood the significance of what had been achieved. Humanity, once underestimated, had demonstrated that observation, empathy, and creativity were forces just as powerful as technology or experience. One evening, as Alara reviewed reports from the observation missions, she received a message from the Galactic Assembly leadership. They requested her presence in a special session. Curious, she arrived to find the chamber filled with delegates from across the galaxy. The leadership explained that they had been observing her work and the impact of her methods. They wanted her to present her approach to all delegates, not just in technical terms, but as a philosophy for collaboration and problem-solving. Alara accepted the invitation. She stood before the assembly and spoke with clarity and calm authority. She explained how humans approach challenges. By listening carefully, observing patterns, asking questions, and fostering collaboration. She illustrated her points with examples from the network, highlighting moments when patience and creativity had resolved issues that force or control could not. The delegates listened in silence, many taking notes or recording her words. For the first time, some began to see humanity not as a minor species to be tolerated, but as a partner capable of inspiring innovation and understanding. Alara did not boast. She simply shared knowledge, demonstrating how a different perspective could lead to results that benefited the entire galaxy. After her presentation, a wave of questions followed. Delegates asked how they could apply human methods to other challenges, from environmental adaptation to interstellar trade to cultural conflicts. Alara responded with patience, encouraging experimentation, observation, and collaboration. She emphasized that solutions were rarely found by a single species alone. The strength of the galaxy lay in the combination of diverse talents, perspectives, and insights. By the end of the session, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Where there had been doubt, now there was curiosity. Where there had been skepticism, now there was interest. Humanity had earned recognition not through force or dominance, but through thought, patience, and the ability to see what others could not. That night, Alara stood in her chamber, looking out at the glittering stars. She reflected on the journey so far, the stabilization of the network, the growth of collaboration, and the recognition of humanity's unique contributions. She understood that the next steps would be even greater, as the galaxy would continue to challenge her people in unexpected ways. But she also knew that humans had proven themselves capable of meeting those challenges, not through weapons, but through intelligence, empathy, and connection. The galaxy watched as it had always watched, but now with a new understanding. Humanity was no longer a minor player in the cosmic arena. Humans were thinkers, observers, collaborators, and innovators. Princess Alara, with her quiet determination and insight, had begun to show the galaxy the true power of a species often underestimated, not by force, but by mind and heart. As she closed her notebook for the night, Alara smiled softly. The journey was far from over, and the challenges ahead would test every skill she had. But she was ready. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger role in the galaxy, and she would continue to lead not with aggression, but with wisdom, creativity, and patience. The galaxy would continue to watch, but it would also learn, and in that learning humanity would shine. And so Princess Alara stood quietly yet resolutely, ready to face the next chapter of her journey, guiding the galaxy with thought, insight, and a deep belief in the power of human ingenuity. The galaxy had changed quietly, almost imperceptibly, since Princess Alara first stepped into the grand chambers of the Galactic Assembly. What had begun as curiosity had grown into respect, though not all species were fully convinced. Some still viewed humanity as young and inexperienced, capable of insight but not of leadership. Yet Alara knew that the true test was not proving her intelligence. It was proving that humans could stand as equals, ready to guide the galaxy through collaboration, innovation, and understanding. A new challenge had emerged, one that required more than stabilization of networks or clever solutions. It was a test of trust, of belief, and of humanity's ability to act with vision. The Assembly called a special session, one that would include all member species, not just the delegates who had worked alongside humans. The topic was unprecedented: the creation of a shared council that would guide interstellar collaboration for generations to come. Every species had a chance to participate, but only those seen as responsible, thoughtful, and capable would be invited to the inner circle. Alara understood immediately what this meant. Humanity's place in the galaxy was on the line. It was not a question of technology or resources. It was a question of character. Could humans, young and untested, be trusted with the responsibility of shaping the future of countless worlds? This was the moment that would define her people's role in the cosmos. The session began with formal speeches from the oldest and most respected civilizations. They praised logic, longevity, and careful planning, emphasizing the importance of experience and order. When it was Alara's turn, she stepped forward with quiet confidence. She did not carry data sheets, diagrams, or charts. She did not attempt to impress with technical knowledge. Instead, she carried humanity itself, the curiosity, the empathy, and the creativity that had allowed her people to solve problems in ways others had overlooked. She spoke clearly, simply, and thoughtfully. She reminded the assembly of the challenges the galaxy had faced, from unstable networks to miscommunications between species, and explained how humanity had contributed. She told stories of observation, collaboration, and subtle understanding, how listening, patience, and curiosity had created solutions no force or command could achieve. She emphasized that strength was not only in power or experience, but in the ability to connect, to learn, and to inspire others. Some delegates nodded in agreement, but others remained skeptical. Alara addressed them directly. "We do not claim to know everything. We do not pretend to be perfect. But we have learned to see patterns that others miss, to understand perspectives that others overlook, and to work together even when differences seem impossible to reconcile. Humanity stands ready not to dominate but to collaborate, to contribute, and to grow alongside you." A hush fell over the chamber. The words were simple, yet their impact was profound. For the first time, many delegates considered humans not as a young, unpredictable species, but as a partner with unique strengths. Alara did not ask for trust. She demonstrated it, through every action, every choice, and every lesson her people had contributed. After her speech, questions came from all corners of the chamber. Delegates asked how humans could continue to contribute, how they approached complex problems, and how they encouraged cooperation among diverse cultures. Alara answered with clarity and humility, giving examples from Earth, from her work on the network, and from her experiences guiding mixed-species teams. She emphasized that learning was ongoing, and that no species, however old, had all the answers. The assembly deliberated late into the cycle of light and shadow across the planet where it floated. Alara returned to her quarters, not resting, but reflecting on every conversation, every reaction, every subtle gesture that indicated progress or hesitation. She understood that leadership was not a moment, it was a process. It was not force, but patience and consistency that earned respect. Over the next days, the assembly reconvened. Delegates debated the merits of each species, considering both technical capability and moral responsibility. Many acknowledged the improvements in the network, the success of collaborative teams, and the unusual but effective methods humans had applied. Still, there were doubts. Could a young species handle the weight of participation in the Council? Could humans maintain balance and fairness when the galaxy's complexities were at their most extreme? Alara anticipated these doubts. She requested a demonstration, not of force or skill, but of humanity's ability to unify diverse species in solving a complex challenge. A series of simulated scenarios was presented, including communication breakdowns, resource conflicts, and cultural misunderstandings. Teams were asked to resolve these problems in real time, using only dialogue, collaboration, and creative thinking. Humans were paired with aliens, and Alara guided the teams quietly, encouraging observation, understanding, and innovation. The results were remarkable. Delegates witnessed solutions that no single species could have produced alone. Humans contributed ideas drawn from empathy, analogies, and careful listening. Aliens provided technical expertise, historical context, and logic. Together, the teams created outcomes that were elegant, balanced, and effective. The assembly watched in growing amazement. Patterns emerged, mistakes were corrected gently, and cooperation flourished where there had once been tension. When the simulations concluded, Alara addressed the assembly once more. "This is not about humans leading alone," she said. It is about humans learning with you, working with you, and helping to guide the galaxy alongside every species represented here. The strength of the galaxy is not in the dominance of one, but in the collaboration of all. Her words resonated deeply. Delegates who had once doubted humanity's place began to see a different perspective. Humans were not reckless, nor inexperienced in the ways that mattered. They were observers, learners, connectors, and innovators. They had proven that insight, empathy, and patience could produce results far beyond traditional measures of power. After long hours of deliberation, the assembly made its decision. Humanity would be invited to join the inner circle of the council, not as overseers, not as rulers, but as equal partners. The news spread quickly across the galaxy, and word reached Earth within cycles of light. Humanity celebrated quietly, not for conquest, but for recognition, for the validation that their unique strengths mattered on the grandest stage. Princess Alara returned to Earth for a brief respite. She walked among forests, oceans, and mountains, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the skepticism she had faced, the doubts of older civilizations, and the quiet perseverance it had taken to guide humans into a position of respect. She thought of the countless teams she had led, the lessons learned, and the ways humanity had grown not through force, but through understanding. Back in the Galactic Assembly, preparations began for the formal integration of humanity into the Council. Delegates worked together to ensure that humans could participate fully, contributing ideas, guidance, and insight. Alara continued to advise, emphasizing patience and collaboration. She reminded everyone that leadership was not about dictating solutions, but about facilitating understanding and cooperation among diverse species. As the day of the formal ceremony arrived, the assembly gathered in its largest chamber. Light from distant stars streamed through crystalline windows, illuminating delegates from countless worlds. Alara stood at the center, not as a conqueror, but as a representative of humanity's potential. The council acknowledged humanity's contributions, praised their methods, and welcomed them into the fold as equals. The applause was quiet but profound, filled with respect, recognition, and hope for the future. Alara felt a quiet pride, but also a deep sense of responsibility. Humanity had been given an opportunity, but it was not a guarantee of success. They would need to continue observing, learning, and collaborating. They would need to remain humble, curious, and thoughtful. And they would need to remind the galaxy that intelligence, empathy, and creativity were as valuable as technology, experience, and power. The celebration continued across the galaxy. Delegates shared stories, exchanged knowledge, and expressed curiosity about human culture. Humanity's reputation had grown not through conquest, but through connection. The galaxy had watched a human princess make her stand, and in doing so, had discovered the value of a species that approached challenges differently. Alara returned to her quarters that night, looking out at the stars with a sense of fulfillment and anticipation. The journey was far from over. The galaxy would continue to present new challenges, unexpected problems, and opportunities for growth. But humanity had proven that it could meet these challenges with intelligence, empathy, and creativity. They had shown that being young and different was not a weakness, but a source of strength. She thought of the countless humans who had worked alongside aliens, the teams that had learned from each other, and the friendships that had formed across worlds. She understood that the true power of humanity lay not in individual brilliance, but in the ability to connect, to inspire, and to guide collectively. The galaxy had seen a human stand, and now it had begun to follow. In the quiet of the night, Alara wrote in her notebook one last time for this chapter of her journey. She reflected on the lessons learned: patience, observation, collaboration, and empathy. She noted the successes, the challenges, and the paths that still lay ahead. And she understood that this was only the beginning. Humanity's place in the stars was secure not because they had conquered, but because they had contributed wisdom, understanding, and a new perspective that the galaxy could not ignore. The galaxy watched as it always had, but now it watched with curiosity, respect, and hope. Humanity had shown that being different was not a liability, but a gift. That courage was not always measured in force, but in thought and heart. That the future of countless worlds could be shaped not by dominance, but by collaboration and understanding. Princess Alara stood quietly, knowing that her work was far from complete, but confident that humanity had made its mark. The galaxy had seen a human stand, and in that stand, it had witnessed the potential of an entire species. The story of the human princess, of patience, observation, and quiet leadership, would be remembered not as a tale of battle, but as a tale of insight, empathy, and the enduring power of humanity's mind and heart. And in that quiet, endless expanse of stars, a new chapter for humanity had begun, one where they would continue to learn, to grow, and to shine among the oldest and wisest species of the galaxy. The galaxy watched as the human princess made her stand,